Let's start with something you probably already know deep down, even if nobody ever said it out loud to you. Sugar has a way of sneaking into our lives quietly, almost like an old friend who overstays their welcome. And once it's there, it's hard to imagine life without it. But here's the thing. Your body isn't broken, and it isn't just getting older in the way you might think. A lot of what feels like inevitable aging is actually your body responding, day after day, to the sugar it keeps receiving. So let's take a walk through what actually happens, day by day, when you set sugar aside for 2 weeks, and why this matters so much more once you've crossed into your 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond. Think back for a moment to how meals used to be. Maybe you remember your grandmother's kitchen, where dessert was a special occasion, a slice of pie on Sunday, maybe a small piece of cake on a birthday. Sugar wasn't hiding in your bread or your spaghetti sauce back then, at least not in the quantities we see today. Somewhere along the way, especially from the 1970s onward, sugar started showing up everywhere, and food companies got very, very good at making it nearly invisible. It's in ketchup. It's in salad dressing. It's in the granola bar you thought was a smart, healthy snack. It's even in some canned soups. So when we talk about cutting out sugar, we're not just talking about turning down a dessert tray. We're talking about becoming a bit of a detective in your own kitchen. Now, here's a question worth sitting with for a second. Why does sugar feel so hard to resist in the first place? It's not a matter of willpower, and it's certainly not a character flaw. Sugar interacts with the reward centers in your brain in a very real, measurable way. When you eat something sweet, your brain releases dopamine, the same chemical involved in feelings of pleasure and reward. Your body is essentially built to enjoy sweetness, because thousands of years ago, sweet foods in nature, like ripe fruit, were a sign of safe, energy-rich food. The problem is, our modern world figured out how to trigger that same reward system constantly with foods that didn't exist in nature at all. So every time you reach for something sugary, you're not fighting a weakness. You're fighting biology that was designed for a very different world than the one we live in now. This is exactly why the first few days of cutting back can feel surprisingly tough, even for people who don't think of themselves as having a sweet tooth. On day 1 and day 2, many people notice a kind of restlessness, maybe a bit of irritability, maybe a headache, maybe just an odd sense that something is missing. This isn't your imagination, and it isn't a sign you're doing something wrong. Your body has simply gotten used to frequent spikes and dips in blood sugar, and when those spikes stop coming, your body notices. It's a bit like turning down the volume on a song you've been listening to your whole life. At first, the silence feels loud. But stick with me, because this part passes faster than most people expect. By around day 3 or 4, something interesting tends to happen. That constant hunger many people over 55 have quietly accepted as normal. The feeling of needing a snack every couple of hours, or the mid-afternoon slump that sends you looking for something sweet, often starts to ease. This has to do with insulin, a hormone your body uses to manage blood sugar. When you eat a lot of added sugar, your insulin works overtime, and over the years, especially as we age, our cells can become less responsive to it. This is sometimes called insulin resistance, and it's incredibly common after 55, even in people who aren't diabetic. When you remove the constant sugar spikes, your body gets a chance to recalibrate. Blood sugar levels start to stay steadier throughout the day, which means fewer of those sudden crashes that leave you feeling shaky, foggy, or desperate for a quick fix. Here's where things get especially interesting for anyone who has struggled with afternoon fatigue. You know the feeling. You eat lunch, and an hour later, you feel like you could fall asleep sitting up. Many people blame this entirely on getting older, but a big part of that heavy, sluggish feeling is actually tied to blood sugar swings. When you eat a meal high in refined sugar or refined carbohydrates, your blood sugar shoots up quickly and then comes crashing back down, often below where it started. That crash is what creates the fatigue. As your body adjusts to life without added sugar, many people report that this afternoon slump becomes noticeably less intense by the end of the first week, and for some, it disappears almost entirely by day 14. Let's talk about the brain for a moment, because this is a part of the story people don't expect. Brain fog, that frustrating feeling of reaching for a word that won't come or walking into a room and forgetting why, is often blamed entirely on age. but research has increasingly connected high sugar intake with inflammation in the body, and the brain is not immune to that inflammation. Some researchers have even started referring to certain patterns of memory and thinking decline as being influenced by blood sugar irregularities, sometimes informally described as effects similar to type 3 diabetes in the brain, though that term is still debated in the scientific community. What we do know is that steadier blood sugar tends to support steadier, clearer thinking. Many people in their 60s and 70s who cut back on sugar for a couple of weeks describe feeling like a bit of mental fog has lifted, as though they can follow a conversation, a crossword puzzle, or a recipe with a little more ease than before. Now let's gently talk about weight, because I know for many of you watching, this is part of why you're here. Losing weight after 55 can feel like a completely different experience than it did in your 20s or 30s, and that's not in your head either. Hormonal shifts, changes in muscle mass, and a naturally slower metabolism all play a role. But added sugar makes this even more complicated, because sugary foods are often calorie-dense without making you feel satisfied. Your body burns through them quickly and then signals you to eat again sooner than it would with a meal built around protein, fiber, and healthy fats. When you remove added sugar, many people notice they naturally eat a bit less, not because they're forcing themselves to, but because real whole foods tend to be more filling. That looser waistband some people notice within 2 weeks often isn't dramatic weight loss. It's frequently linked to reduced water retention, since sugar can cause the body to hold onto extra water, especially when eaten in excess. There's also something happening with your skin that might surprise you. Sugar molecules can attach to proteins in your body through a process called glycation, and over time this can affect collagen and elastin, the very things responsible for skin's natural elasticity. This process speeds up somewhat as we age anyway, but a diet high in added sugar can accelerate it further. Many people who take a break from sugar for even a couple of weeks report that their skin looks a little brighter, a little less puffy, and slightly more even in tone. It's not a miracle transformation, and this isn't about chasing youth. It's simply your skin responding to a calmer internal environment, without the constant inflammation that added sugar can contribute to. Let's take a pause here and think about sleep, because so many of you have probably mentioned to a friend, a spouse, or even just to yourself that sleep isn't what it used to be. Sugar can quietly interfere with sleep quality in a few different ways. Blood sugar crashes during the night can actually wake the body up, sometimes without you even realizing why you stirred. Sugar can also affect the production of certain neurotransmitters involved in relaxation and sleep regulation. As your blood sugar becomes more stable throughout the 2 weeks, many people notice they fall asleep a little easier and wake up feeling slightly more rested, even if the number of hours they slept stayed exactly the same. It's less about quantity of sleep and more about the quality of it. Now, I want to address something honestly, because I think you deserve honesty rather than an overly rosy picture. The first few days of cutting sugar are not always comfortable. Cravings can feel intense, especially in the evening, which tends to be when many people are most tired and most likely to reach for something sweet out of habit rather than true hunger. This is where understanding your own patterns becomes so valuable. Ask yourself honestly, are you craving sugar because your body genuinely needs energy, or because it's become a habit tied to watching television, unwinding after a long day, or simply because it's always been there on the counter? Recognizing the difference between physical craving and emotional habit is often the turning point that makes the next 12 days feel far more manageable than the first two. One thing that tends to help enormously is understanding that cravings usually only last somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes. They rise, they peak, and then if you don't feed them, they fall back down again, often much faster than people expect.